Hello, and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments in the war in Gaza. From the latest 24 hours to 48 hours, we see that the Israeli forces have managed to advance in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as in the central parts south of Gaza City and in the northern parts of the city. So what we've seen is that the Israeli forces in the central parts have managed to advance to the river line, to the sea, where they've managed to cut off the Gaza Strip into two, the northern and southern parts. There's going to be further operations here in the central parts to try and hold the front line by the river line here to the south, where they will continue fighting until they hold that position and allow that to be the front line to the south. And in the meantime, there will also be more operations in the northern direction to try and reach the outskirts of Gaza City, similar to what is happening in the northern side, where we've seen the Israeli forces launch attacks through the beaches here to the northwest of Gaza, in the direction of Beit Lahia and Jabalia here to the north of the Gaza City. These two areas are separate from Gaza City itself. The highest population density area of Gaza City is actually Jabalia, as it is a refugee camp where there's a lot of high-rise buildings within the area, allowing it to have a very high population density. Then we have Gaza City itself, which is a large urban area filled with houses, residential areas, and everything else you see in a normal city. It has a population of approximately 1 million people prior to the war, with now most of the civilians having fled to the south, but there's still a significant amount in the northern parts. How many exactly? There's no specific number on it. However, what we do see is that the Israeli forces are currently launching a three-pronged attack in the north, from the northwest, directly to the north, and from the northeast. The reason for this is that there is the Beit Hanun area here to the northeast. This is separate from the rest of the areas. And then we have the Beit Lahia and Jabalia refugee camp area, which covers this area right here. So most likely the Israeli forces is looking to cut off Gaza City itself from Jabalia here to the northern parts of the city, and cut off Beit Lahia from Beit Hanun here in the northeast, which will make it into a three-part area in the northern parts. Gaza City as a whole being a singular part of the area, and then we have the Beit Lahia area here in the central parts combined with Jabalia, and then finally the Beit Hanun area in the northeast. So the Beit Hanun area is clearly the first goal of the Israeli forces, as it is the smallest area which is separate from the other areas with these suburban areas here to the west of the Beit Hanun center. Most of Beit Hanun is already fallen under Israeli forces. This is likely because the Palestinian forces, Hamas, have not actually many forces in this area, as it is so far from everywhere else. This is most likely just an outpost to try and slow down the Israeli forces, while their main forces here are in Gaza City and in the Jabalia refugee camp, which Jabalia itself is known to be a hub for Hamas activities. So most likely what we're seeing is that the Israeli forces are going to capture the Beit Hanun area soon in the next coming days, after which they'll start launching attacks towards Beit Lahia from the north, as well as in the central parts, trying to cut up the Jabalia part from the northern and the southern parts, the populated area here in the north, separating it from the Gaza City, and then we'll see assaults towards Gaza City combined with assaults towards Jabalia and Beit Lahia here in the north. Over these past 2 days, we have seen multiple operations and videos from these operations. First one is from Hamas, where we see a group of Hamas operatives here in the northern parts of Gaza City, where we are here in these forested areas with not a lot of populations and Israeli tanks in the area. These tanks were spotted by Hamas, and they go out of their tunnels, launch a ambush with rocket launchers, RPGs that have custom-made warheads, which are able to penetrate the armor of the Merkava tanks. They have multiple of these possibilities with the Merkava tanks. The first one is a direct hit to the front, which may or may not penetrate the armor of the Merkava tanks, because it is right there at the limit. A direct hit to the side or the back will penetrate the Merkava tank, whichever one it is, whether it is the 3, 4, or 4M. However, the 4M has a trophy system. As long as it is active, it will not be able to penetrate the Merkava 4M tank. However, we see that with an indirect hit to the front, it will not penetrate, and an indirect hit to the side, it may not, and it may penetrate, and then finally an indirect hit to the back will penetrate. We do not see exactly where they hit in this video, but from the perspective, it seems to be from the side. If it's a direct hit, it will penetrate. If it's an indirect hit, it may still penetrate. So these are being hit from their weak points, and therefore it is likely that these tanks were at least damaged, if not destroyed. Then we have this video here from the Israeli military, where we see a tank shooting at some areas and infantry by the houses. These infantry move in groups combined, which is unlike what we see in the Russo-Ukrainian war, where we see them spread apart. The reason for this is that the Hamas forces do not have a lot of artillery, but despite that, there are multiple videos shown of drones dropping grenades on groupings of Israeli forces and them actually getting hit by artillery, however little there is. So this shows that despite them considering Hamas as a much smaller and weaker force, which it is, they still have a limited capability in modern war, and their inability to adapt to the lessons of the Russo-Ukrainian war is showing in their casualty numbers, which are not official because official numbers are clearly too little compared to what we've seen on video. Finally, there is another video by Hamas where they again go out of these tunnels, appear in the middle of some bushes, which shows that their entrances and exits to these tunnels are heavily camouflaged, which allows them to move in and out of them without getting detected. We see here from this video that the soldier runs up to a tank they see from the exit of the tunnel, after which he goes up, puts down one of the warheads on the side of the tank at one of its weak points, after which he pulls the trigger, runs away, and then he pulls up an RPG and launches that on the warhead, which allows for a massive explosion, which is why we see that this tank most likely was destroyed. We also see from this video that there were multiple tanks right next to each other. None of them detected him. This could possibly be a parking spot, but based on the smoke that is here in the area, they are likely moving, which means that they just have poor awareness. And based on all of this, we see that they yet again have not and failed to learn from the Russo-Ukrainian war, the important lessons therefrom. Those lessons include but aren't limited to the tanks not moving by itself without infantry having to be next to the tanks and to cover for them in the sides, for example in the forest patches or in the bushes like we see here. The tunnels are located here. If the infantry were present, they could alert the tanks or even take down the Hamas fighters, but they didn't because they didn't learn. Another lesson is the proximity of these tanks being too close to each other. With this, we see that there is a vulnerability here, that the Hamas fighters, if they had more firepower, they could easily just have gone through these tunnels and ambushed multiple tanks instead of just one, as we see in the first video, where they actually launched multiple attacks on multiple tanks instead of just a singular attack on a singular tank. So there are multiple demerits to the tactics that the Israeli use. These are old tactics, not keeping up with modern times, and with the increased firepower and ability to learn by the Hamas fighters, they're able to inflict heavy casualties on the Israeli forces. Based on these videos alone, there could have been upwards of 20 casualties on the Israeli side, which is already more than the Israelis officially claiming throughout this ground offensive over the past few days. Now, on a more geopolitical sense, the Hezbollah leader had a speech earlier today where he talked about the role of Hezbollah in this war, and he will not invade anyone. Instead, he will just continue what he's currently doing in southern Lebanon and try to keep parts of the Israeli army to the north and prevent them from concentrating all of their forces towards Gaza, and at the same time keeping them in check here in the north. We then also see that from the political situation in the United States, there is this drama between Congress and the Democratic leadership of the country, where Joe Biden wants a combined aid package to both Israel and Ukraine, while the Speaker of the House wants two separate packages because he wants additional conditions to the aid to Ukraine, while he wants no conditions whatsoever to the aid to Israel. So he wants 2 different votes for the 2 different packages instead of combining them into a single one, while Joe Biden has said that he would veto any package that goes through both Congress and the Senate if it does not include both of these together. So there's some delay there for any aid to both Israel and Ukraine. And finally, there's a report by the United States that claims that Iran is now ready to create nukes within a short span of 2 weeks. That was at September. So by now, Iran can create a nuke whenever they want to. And that is, quote unquote, an existential threat to the United States, according to that report. Therefore, we see that there's likely to be some sort of conflict between the United States and Iran due to this, where the United States is continuously talking about the nuclear capacity of Iran because they see that Iran with nukes is a danger to Israel and thus a danger to the United States, because Israel is in the interest of the United States to have some sort of control in the Middle East. So there's a huge geopolitical issue from this, and therefore there's likely to be some sort of confrontation between Iran and the United States, whether it be airstrikes by the United States on nuclear facilities within Iran, or by Israel towards Iran, or a direct war between United States and Iran. Whichever it is, I don't know, but there's most likely something coming based on that. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.